Just to make sure. This is probably, I'm afraid. Because I'm afraid it's going to be like, this is going to be ruffling up against it. Shit.
Joe, this is too late to be doing this, okay?
I know. I had it hooked up and then
I know. Everything was perfect and you're messing it up already. Seriously, I come back to this after a long time and this is what I get. Yeah.
Clovis. Here we go. Get that motherfucker.
Nate, we watched Sleepwalkers.
We did,
just now. Directed by Mick Garris, written by Stephen King, and starring the lady who played the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact.
And is she bringing it all again in this?
Mrs. Brady, it was really nice to meet you.
Oh, very nice to meet you.
So, tell me, Nate, you chose this movie for us to watch.
Yes, I have seen a lot of stuff on the internet of people just like riffing this movie to death just because it's one of those Stephen King adaptations, well actually not even adaptations, there's a script to screen movie. But there's just so much stuff in it that's just ridiculous. Like everything that's like hokey about Stephen King, everything that's silly about Stephen King, and kind of good about Stephen King all in one movie. And Mick Garris being one of your favorite horror directors, I thought, you know what, he might like this. Let's watch this together and see what happens.
Yeah, Mick Garris, I actually am not terribly familiar with a lot of his movies. I've seen Psycho 4, the beginning. I've seen, most recently, Nightmare Cinema, which he had a heavy hand in and he directed a lot of it. But I think I'm more familiar with him just by his name in the horror community and some of his podcasts that he's done.
Yeah.
And his conversation around horror film.
Yeah.
So I've been meaning to get around to some more of his actual movies.
Well, actually, surprisingly, funny enough, this was his first movie. I guess his big studio picture, like when he got hired on. It was mentioned in the
Right, yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
It was my first studio film. And, you know, I'd done Critters 2 before that, and I'd done Psycho 4 before that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get around to this movie, so I'm glad that you finally made this. Tell me, how's your relationship with your mom?
They have a really good, loving relationship.
So going into this, the only thing that I really knew about it was that, it's that movie about incest with cat people.
Yes, it does come across like that for a lot of people when they reference it.
But this really, this movie was in my wheelhouse a lot more than I thought it was going to be, because it goes for that crazy schlocky kind of early 90s, late 80s tone that I love, with these insane bits of just frantic violence, over-the-top violence, just all of a sudden, out of nowhere.
Biting people's hands and tearing off limbs and...
With these great old-school effects, and it happens so suddenly. It is the funniest thing.
Yeah.
But it's... I'm not saying funny in a bad way.
No.
I'm saying funny in a they're going for this over-the-top shock value kind of feel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's at that point, it kind of like, I kind of noticed when we were watching it, it suddenly turned for you. It's like, oh, so that's when it's getting good.
Right, exactly. It's
when that happens, his reaction was great.
Your generation is so mercenary, Charles. Money this, money that. Well, money is not the only medium of exchange.
Where's this man going?
What? Yeah!
Put their hands to themselves. Here's yours.
You had.
Yes. All the yes.
I'm sorry!
It's too late to apologize.
This movie really did hit its stride for me around that point, and then it just... one thing we watched in an interview on the Blu-ray with Mick Garris, where he was talking about how making comparisons to Psycho, which I think were kind of inevitable considering that Mick Garris did a Psycho sequel, and there we have this very unhealthy mother-son relationship.
Well, you
in
were
this
kind of
movie,
bringing
too.
it up quite a bit as well when we were watching.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I've got some Norman Bates vibes going on here.
No, this is happening.
I think that this is a sequel to Psycho after like he killed his mom. Just like this is his imagination of his life. Now it's like was it the last season of Bates Motel?
Oh, yeah.
But Mick Garris mentioned something interesting which I hadn't thought about, which was that although you want this character, I forget the character's name, to be, I think it's Charles.
Charles Brady.
Thanks for the help, Charles Brady.
Don't mention it.
You wanted him to be charming at the beginning because you want to get the impression that like, oh yeah, he knows what he's doing, he's got it all together.
Right.
But when he makes that turn, there is no going back for him. There is no redemption in the audience's eyes of,
Well, when you try-
he's misunderstood. No, he's just flat out evil from then on.
Well, when you kind of decide to take advantage of a girl in a cemetery, when all you're going to do there is do some rubbing, you do know there is no turning back.
Why don't you just think of yourself as lunch?
It's just the stuff he's like, and the way he's delivering certain things is just, it's so over the top. Like he's getting upset of like, my shirt, my mom's gonna kill me.
The one-liners in this movie are priceless.
It's probably the biggest reason why I wanted him to watch it, because that whole cop kebab thing, my gosh, I'm so glad you watched that.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, this is the best movie ever made. If I have a criticism about this movie, it's the cat people powers. They weren't inconsistent, but they were ill-defined. And I know, again, in the interview with Mick Garris, he said that they went back and they shot the opening scene to kind of clarify a few things.
Which didn't really clarify anything.
I was getting very confused when, okay, now they can turn things invisible. Oh, now they can change the way the car looks.
It was kind of like one of those things where the powers were they kind of made them up as the plot went along.
Right, but they were consistent with them after that. I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, they need the car to turn invisible, or they needed the car to change right here. Well, okay, yeah, now they can do that again later, very specifically with the car, but then the biggest question, can they do that with other things? And but because of the tone of the movie, I wasn't asking too many questions.
Cop kebab!
No, I think it kind of does set it up, but then afterwards it's like, you can buy into it, just enjoy the ride, and yeah.
Right.
It doesn't become something you get so fixated on.
It has the look and feel of many other Stephen King movies. I mean, specifically coming to mind, I think of Pet Sematary.
Pet Sematary.
Because that's kind of my go-to Stephen King movie from this era. But it had the craziness of something like
a Sam Raimi movie in a way.
A Sam Raimi movie. I'm watching all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies
Yeah.
right now in the middle of that, and so that brings to mind something like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation with Matthew McConaughey.
Right.
I've got a lot of that in this movie.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
the big thing he was pointing out when the guy's like carving a T into his shoulder, and he's like, "Oh, I'm getting some McConaughey vibes going on."
What if I do this?
So yeah, as far as a piece of 80s horror comedy schlock, I would recommend this movie if you're not turned off by all the cat people incest.
Mother.
Yeah, which honestly, looking today's standards, that's not that bad. It just comes off really weird.
I mean, it's not graphic. It's still cat people incest.
Yes, I mean, at least it wasn't them in the rubber suits doing it. And wait, they kind of did do it in one scene.
Okay, when you said rubber suits, first thing that came to mind was the Naked Gun, where they put on full body condoms.
No, that is not what they look like in this movie at all.